Right then, so in this video, I kind of am answering a question. It's a question that I get sometime, and it's generally along the lines of, do you do like a one-off 12-week kind of program? And even though that sounds like a pretty easy to answer, boring question, I think this is quite an interesting topic as to why I don't offer extended programs really anymore. And that's because, in my opinion, there's a difference between programming and coaching. And I want to look at, to start with, I'm going to look at a study. And studies often are boring, but this one, in my opinion, isn't. It's quite interesting, and it relates to what I'm going to talk about. And it's just a cool study. And basically, so I've got it up on my screen, and it's a study on steroids, and it was done in 2000. The authors, if you wanted to look at it, were... Oh, my fucking computer's great. Magnamaris, and it was done in 2000, and it's, by the looks of it, it'd be English people who were in the study. So basically what it was, all participants were national level powerlifters, and it's got the numbers as well. So just to look over what the starting numbers were, there's a guy at the top, 82.5 kilo class with a 200 kilo bench, 240 deadlift, 237 squat. Pick a random other guy. I've got a guy at 93.8 kilo. He bench presses 230 kilo, deadlift 280 kilo, squat 277.5 kilo. So my point is, there was 11 participants, and the fucking strong guys. These are your general study participants who have trained for a year at the uni gym, kind of half-assed, the strong guys. So that makes it all the more interesting as far as the results go. So what the study was, basically these guys train together, these 11 guys, or most of them must do, and they've approached their coach, and they've discussed using steroids with him before. I'm presuming that they're in a tested federation, but they've discussed using them. The coach knew that there was some of them who were very open to using them, so he's used this as he's a professor or researcher or whatever. He's used this as an opportunity to see if his kind of hypothesis works. And what that was, so all these participants, they've had the training notes studied. Obviously they're all at a high level, they're all training well, and they've done a test day. I think they might have done, so they've done 2 test days, 14 days prior to the study, and then carried on training as usual. In these 2 test days, they've tested 1 rep maxes, squat, bench, deadlift under strict judging conditions. So they've been properly judged, everything as it would be in a comp, and they've taken the notes and they've looked at them and said, right, yeah, they're all at or within 2.5 kilo of the 1 rep max. It's as we'd expect. There's no fucking hell, you're 10 kilo off what you'd usually hit, or no real surprises, or you've gained 5 kilo there or 10 kilo there. They're all as the coaches would have expected. And then after that, I believe, it's not really clear, but they've had a 2-week gap or week gap where they've just trained normally. They've gone off trained. Then they've come in for another test day. And what they've been told is that they're trialing a new, really fast-acting steroid. Obviously, they're just giving him saccharin, so sugar pills. And they've told all these participants that they're trialling a new fast-acting steroid that should work pre-workout to boost the strength gains. So they've gone into this next trial. I believe it's 2 weeks, so it could be a week after the baseline trials. Normal training. The only difference is they've now had the sugar pills before the trained. And so we'll look at the actual results. Every single participant gained significant amounts of strength, or the maxes went up significantly on bench and on deadlift and on squat. That is every single participant in the study. So you've got, on the bench press trial, you've got 10 kilo increase, 5, 10, 7.5, 12.5, 7.5, 12.5, and then 10s. So everyone's really about an average of 10 kilo to the bench by taking these sugar pills pre-workout. Similar on deadlift, similar on squat. They've actually gained a little bit more on squat, a little bit more on deadlift, as you'd probably expect. So more like 12.5, 15 kilo. And that's every single participant, national level powerlifters. They've had a sugar pill, they've been told it's steroids. Then I find that very interesting. But the next thing they did was they've sent them away to train for a week. Right, do your normal training. We're going to give you these steroids. take 2 a day, and then you're coming back in a week for even more testing. Let's see if you can beat those maxes. So they've trained as usual, and they've come back in for the next trial, which was a week later, and they're going to do another 1 rep max squat, bench, deadlift. And they've had a word with the researchers, have had a word with them, how was your training? And they've all said that the training was better. Like they've got, I think they've used the word vigour, so there's more vigour. Everything felt better. They felt more up for it. Training, they were lifting slightly heavier weights than they'd usually be hitting. They'd hit more reps than they were usually hitting. Basically, the steroids worked, and they worked well. So before the second trial, so this is a week after the first trial, they've told half of the participants, right, look, you haven't been taking steroids, you've been taking sugar pills. So you've gained that weight on your last 1 rep maxes, but you've gained it. Yeah, you've hit them numbers, but it went down to steroids. It was all psychological. And that group, when they've tested, they retested. So the trial 2, a lot of them, to be fair, have kept something on the bench press. One of them was 2.5 kilo down versus the first trial, but a lot of them, to be fair, they've kept a bit of what they gained. One person's kept it the same, most are down 5 kilo, but it's still a little bit up on what the previous 1 rep max was. On the squat and deadlift, everyone lost weight on the deadlift. So nobody lifted the same amount of weight on the deadlift. In fact, nobody beat what they did originally before they started these steroids. So everyone's maxes were less than what they were, or the same as what they were before this study even occurred. Now, on the other side of the coin, the guys who weren't told anything before the second trial have all either gained a little bit or kept every single increase from the first trial the week before. Nobody's lost anything off any lift. So if, say, they went in, they had a baseline of, right, before this study, they benched 200 kilo. They've come in, they've had these sugar pills, they've benched 210 kilo on the first session. On that second session, that guy, I'll use that guy as an example, that guy's benched 210 kilo again. Didn't lose anything off it. So fair enough, they haven't gained they haven't gained a lot or much or anything versus the first actual trial, but they haven't lost it. Whereas the people who got told that they were taking placebo, it was a sugar pill, they've lost what they originally, so that they're back to square one basically. And that's just really interesting because it is obviously showing placebo. Placebo is one of my favourite areas of study. I just find it really interesting. So my point here is, like, I'm getting back to the coaching. So as a coach, I think it's important for clients, athletes, they've got to believe in what you're doing. They've got to believe in their training, and that's going to give them intent to train. They're going to train harder. They're going to train with more purpose. Now, if I was just to say that off the bat, it's kind of a wishy-washy, well, yeah, but still, if you're programmed to do that and you do it, it doesn't matter, does it? You're hitting the numbers, you're going to gain the same. But that's not the case at all. How you approach training, your mindset towards training is huge. And that's an area that coaches can really help athletes with. And how you do that is, for a start, you've got to know why you're programming an exercise as a coach, or even if it's your own training. So you're squatting that weight for that many reps in this session. What is the purpose of the session? Like, what are you trying to achieve in this session? Why have you chosen to do that instead of something else? And now everything, in my opinion, should have a place. This means, as a coach, you've got to understand the underlying mechanisms of adaptation that allow you to increase strength, how to implement these successfully, and be asked to actually implement them properly as well. Because it's easy enough to fob someone off and write, squat, yeah, you did 200 for 5 last week, we'll just go 202.5 for 5 next week. Like, maybe there's a time and a place for it, and I'm sure there is, and I'm sure that there's times where that's successful. But a lot of the time when I see stuff like that, it's lazy coaching to me, just on the whole. Now, you've got to educate your athlete as to why they're doing something. If I've got a client and they know why they're trying to achieve by doing an exercise, I know they're going to put more intent into it. They're putting more intent into every exercise, every session. They're going to progress faster, and that's not something you can do it with a 12-week plan. So if I was to set, I used to do 12-week programs, and it's very much that's what I think is going to be best for you. Go off and do it. A step away from that, I'd be picking up a 12-week generic program online. There's a lot of good 12-week programs out there. The problem is they are generic, which means I'm quite big on individuality. I think it's more important than maybe some people do. I think, and you can see it with people who say they're very good at hitting reps at 90%, but get to 100% and it crumbles apart. And then with a lot of these 12-week programs, you're spending a long time between 80 and 87%. So that person in particular is probably not going to gain as well as they could do had they had an individualized plan that focused more towards 1 rep max weights, just to get used to them. So yeah, as a coach, I want my clients to know, my athletes to know, why are they doing this exercise? What is the purpose of the session? Where is the training going? And that's going to help increase the intent at which they train. And then I've got a little bit wrote down, so I'll try and figure out what I'm actually going to say. Yeah, so one of the reasons that I no longer like to do 12-week plans is I don't like the rigidity to it. So it's very hard to do a 12-week plan and give pointers as I usually would. So in a lot of cases, it'll be, right, today I want you to do that, but if this happens, do that. When you're doing a 12-week plan, you don't know what's going to happen on week 10. You don't know if they've tweaked the bicep on week 3 and it's still niggling on a heavy bench day and they don't know whether to back off a little bit or just go for it. That can't be accounted for. Whereas the way I prefer to do coaching, which is a week-to-week basis, I'm getting a lot of feedback, which isn't for everybody. Not everybody has the time or energy or wants to put a lot of feedback in. I'm getting a lot of feedback, so I can make these kind of judgment calls as and when they come up. And when I do that, I'll try and explain to my athlete why I'm making those calls. In turn, they get to learn what they should or what they could potentially do in these situations, which it's improving their knowledge and education, but it's improving their ability to train for themselves, which is important, I think. And I think it does improve rate of progress when you know how to do that. So the rigidity of a 12-week plan, I'm not a fan of. I like to, it's not necessarily micromanage, but like for an instance, I'd perhaps get someone who, they'll message me, right, I've been ill yesterday, I haven't managed to get my food in, I feel okay today, but I had a real shit sleep. Do I go ahead and hit the session as usual, or do I need to adjust it in some way? So obviously that depends on a lot of circumstances. In some cases it might be, look, you need to go and nail those numbers. There may be at times a slight increase in injury risk potentially because of the going into it with lack of sleep and not off the best recovery from the previous session. It's just kind of working out where that line is, where it's getting to a point where it's either how high is the actual risk versus what it would be. And at the end of the day, there's got to be some part of the person that builds resilience. You're not necessarily going to feel good on comp day. Maybe on comp day you've been ill the night before and you need to go and hit the numbers and perform. So if you've had training days where you've had a bit of a shit sleep, you haven't been feeling great, yet you come in and still hit the numbers, that builds that resilience up, and it psychologically, you're going into a competition day. If you feel like that, it doesn't matter, I can still perform. And then there's other days where it might be, look, you've been training hard, you're at kind of the edge of where we want you as far as fatigue goes. Just pull back that session, just pull back a bit. Totally avoid getting injury. We'll take a deload day or change the exercise variations, and then push on again after that. So things like that can't be accounted for. That's, in my opinion, that's coaching. Whereas setting out a 12-week plan is programming. It's the two different things. Coaching involves, you've got to have a good relationship with the athlete. You've got to be able to make calls on a week-to-week basis based on, I'm generally a big fan, so I am a big fan of, I like John Keeley and Mike Teixeira as far as their approaches to powerlifting go. So I don't stick with an RPE system. I do use reps in reserve, but I combine that with actual numbers as well. But I like their approach to periodization, you could say. So I think having a rigid plan, it gets too hard to get away from that plan. If you've got a competition in 12 weeks, right? On week 12, 11 doing that, 10 I'm doing that, 9 I'm doing that. If something goes wrong, it gets very hard to change that plan because psychologically it's hard. You've had a plan that's perfect, it's going to get you to where you want to be, so you've just got to keep plugging away and hit the numbers, when really, in the back of your mind, you know that it's going to be better to change tact. So I like to have an outline of where I'd like things to go, but that's going to change on a week-to-week basis depending on how the response to training's going, any injuries that come up, any niggles that come up, the amount of stress that someone's under, whether that's something's come up at work, I'm working extra hours, I'm really stressed, how's that going to affect training? When you look at like John Keeley's work, one of the big things he talks about is how something along the lines of the mechanical stimuli of training is overlaid on a biochemical backdrop, meaning how you feel going into the gym is going to dictate to some extent your adaptation from the training session itself. If you're going into the training session and you're doing squats and you've had a little bit of your knees keep niggling you and you've been thinking all day, fucking hell, I'm squatting, my knee's going to hurt today. If I maybe change it like change my technique a little bit, or if I warm up like this, but in the back of your mind you're still thinking, not looking forward to this, my knee's going to hurt, I'm going to be sore tomorrow, it's not going to feel good. Like that's going to affect your hormonal response. Like your hormones are going to be affected by your psychology. Sorry. So you're talking things like cortisol might increase. If you're going into a session with high levels of cortisol, that it could potentially blunt adaptation to the actual training. So we need to, as a coach, I try to make sure that people enjoy the training. So I think enjoying training is massive, because if someone enjoys it, they're going to put more into it. And there's usually a workaround. There's some exercises where you might think, look, you've just got to dig in and get them done. The enjoyment might be from being able to get through it and hit certain numbers, which is one reason why I like to give targets. People seem to work well when it's, today I'm coming in, I've got to hit this number, I'm going to hit a PB. I can do that often. So yeah, how you feel and how your hormones, how your hormonal level is going into training can affect the adaptation to the work that you do. And that's something that isn't accounted for with most kind of periodization models that don't take the athlete into account, which again, I've mainly got that through John Keeley's work, studying what John Keeley's said, which I find really interesting. Obviously, there is a big part of it is programming, like that's still a big part, but it just doesn't take into account the athlete themselves a lot of the time, how they're feeling, how they're sleeping, what are they doing diet-wise, so you've got to put all these factors into the pot and then decide, right, what's the best approach now? The best approach now might not be the best approach a year ago, and it might not be the best approach in 3 months' time. It's all going to change. And then you've also got coaching's also about the little things as well. So there might not be such little things. There might be, right, I'm not making strength improvements. Why aren't you making strength? Right, you're not building muscle. Why aren't you building muscle? I can't eat enough. Why can't you eat enough? I just start hungry. Right, so now we're figuring out how can we get this athlete to eat more food. They eat more food, they build more muscle, gain strength. Or it might be, right, let's back off, let's cut some body fat. You improve your, try and retain your strength as we lose body fat, build back up again, your hunger's back, you've got to have more muscle at the same body weight eventually, strength goes up. So it's finding workarounds. How's your sleep? Do we have, can we improve it anyway? Is there anything we can do to improve your sleep schedule? Is there anything, so can we, just general basic things like blue light glasses and things like that. They're only little things, but they add up. When you get all these things adding up, it makes a big difference. I think running out of things to say really now. So yeah, that's why I do generally, well, I don't now, I don't do 12-week plans because I like a hands-on approach. I like to be able to see get a good relationship with the athlete, how are they feeling, what's going to be the best route next week, rather than what's going to be the best thing to do in 8 weeks' time, which it's a guessing game, and no matter how experienced you are, it's going to fall apart, even the best laid plans. So yeah, and that is why now I just do week-to-week coaching. Thanks for listening, long video, and I'll try and get another one out soon.